Hello. Tell or ask me anything in the chat. Debug says 4 hours late to your own stream. I mean, I never promised that I would stream it this time, you know? So I don't think so. Tell or ask me anything in the chat. Yazdan says, dude, seriously, you need to get a job? Okay. PE says, hair looking wild. Sorry. Mr. Beatles says, who's your favorite singer or band? Well, I do like the Beatles. Jack says, yo, Don, I'm back, buddy. How you doing? Hello, Jack. I'm doing good. Nikki says, hello, Don. Hello, Nikki. Femboy Stormtrooper says, yo, what's up, Goku? Because my hair is crazy. You're calling me Goku? Okay. Someone says hi. Hello. Lewis says, I was about to go to sleep, sad, thinking there wouldn't be a stream today. Day 9 of asking Don to play Minecraft with me, please. I admire your determination, but I'm gonna have to decline. Orc says, messy hair, don't care. You don't care. It's okay. Okay. Lego says hi. Hello, Lego. PE says, tragic that I'm declining to play Minecraft with Lewis. Okay. Soriano says, watching Degrassi at 4:32 a.m. Are you calling this Degrassi? What does that mean? Luis Alvarez says, sorry for the spelling. My eyes are half asleep, broski. You're apologizing for your bad spelling and your last message. I didn't even really notice it. Nicole says, skipped again. Sorry. Mustafa says, I assume you might be working for a night shift. Maybe. Raphael says, Don, I'm sorry, please unban me. You're not banned from anything. Soriano says, no, Don, I'm watching the hit Canadian TV show called Degrassi. Oh, there's an actual show called that. Okay. Femboy says, I blame Don for deteriorating my sleep schedule. Sorry. Tango says, hello, Don Benitez. Hello, Tango. No Ordinary says, hello from the Isle of Man. Hello, No Ordinary. Lewis says, so I'm guessing you're not playing Minecraft with me. I'm not. I declined. Family Videos says hi. Hello, Family Videos. Old says, Don essentially tore me down to the point I have no self-worth. How would I have done that? Extreme says, why are you so pale? Like that one viral video. Okay. Kwan says, you have the same haircut as me. Cool. Dolly says, hit that like, share, and connect. Only if you want to. Bree says, hey Don, your hair looks a little wild today. Yeah, I guess it does. Sorry for the lack of professionalism. Seriously. Lewis says, have you subscribed to PewDiePie yet? I used to, but now I'm unsubscribed. Nicole says he doesn't block comments. I don't. Generally. Femboy says, will you play No Man's Sky with me? We can visit the galactic core together. It would be funny if I said yes. because Lewis has been trying to play Minecraft with me for 10 days, 9 days, but I decline. Lego says, how many subscribers do you have? 3,000 something. Ethan says, hi, I'm 9 years old. You should leave then. Jonathan says, John Pork has arrived. Hello, John Pork. Bree says, I love No Man's Sky. Haven't played it in a while. You like that game? I heard of the game called Satisfactory. I thought that game looked interesting. MS says he doesn't like sport or blood at that. What? User says favorite Bollywood movie. I don't know Bollywood movies. Nicole says, Ethan, hand the phone to your parents. Okay. Raphael says, Factorio is good if you liked Satisfactory. Okay, thank you for the recommendation. Ecto says, Don Benitez is my hero. I shouldn't be. Phoebe says, you good? You seem upset. I am good. Robert says, happy Tuesday. Thank you. Dola says, hey, Edgar Cullen, do you like Devil May Cry? I haven't played it. Femboy says, Imperials or Stormcloaks? I mean, is that a Satisfactory reference? Like, I haven't played the game Satisfactory. I just thought it looked interesting from videos. Zeus says, you look like the evil kid from Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. The video game obsessed kid. Maybe. Extreme says, do you make money off of YouTube? Yes. Femboy says, that's a Skyrim reference. Okay, I haven't played Skyrim either. Lenny says, hey Don. Hello, Lenny. Debug says, Don, why are you 4 hours late? I'm not late. I never promised I would stream at a specific time. Debug says, Don, why are you 4 hours late? As I said. Yazdan says, yo, you got monetized? Yeah. Extreme says, when did you start YouTube? Well, I started live streaming and posting on this channel a few months ago. Mr. Beetle says, you look like a Zoolander. Okay. Vanny says, I'm 10 years old. Okay. Jameson says, are you being held hostage? Why do you keep looking to the side? It just helps me think, moving around. Nicole says he's 19 to 22. That's your guess on my age? Okay. Debug says, I know, but you usually stream at 10. I've usually streamed at the same time, that's true, but I never made any promises. Bad Boy says hi. Hello, Bad Boy. Lewis says, subscribe to PewDiePie. No, but his videos are kind of good. Extreme says, would you be mad if you got swatted? No, I would be happy. Just kidding. Yes. The King says, hi, how things? Good, thank you. Undying says, hi, Don, I love your deep voice. Thank you. Young says, I am autism. Okay. Zeus says, why does your room look so small? Because of the camera angle. Thrift says, Don, may please me, bro. I'm not gonna sexually please you. Lewis says, so you are implying your content is superior to that of PewDiePie? No, I'm just saying his stuff is not really my style anymore. TS says, show me your side profile. No, but maybe I'll incidentally show it off later. Riandra says, stop saying okay. No. None of your business says, why are some people oddly perverted? I don't think I've gotten that much perverted comments this stream, like only one, so. Joe Time says Dr. Pepper or Mr. Pibb. Is Mr. Pibb a knockoff Dr. Pepper? I mean, I like Dr. Pepper, so. Spursy says my name is too hard to pronounce. Okay. Extreme says, how do you handle the hundreds of women always hitting on you? I mean, it's on a live stream chat, so I just don't care about it. Femboy says, do you care for the television program The Sopranos? People write it off as a mafia show, but it's more of a character study, family drama, dark comedy. It looks like a really good show. I haven't watched it, but it's on my list. None of your business says, I've watched one other stream of yours and it was sprinkled with perverted propositions that weren't even funny or intriguing. I mean, I think randomness can be funny and interesting. I think if something is interesting from randomness, it's kind of like a low form of interesting, but I think it is like interesting to a degree. Abdullah says, be Muslim? No. Dream Man says, don't be Muslim? Okay. Hi says, go shower, bro. I'm not filthy. None of your business says randomness can be funny and a low form of interesting. It's a pretty cool assessment. Okay. Undying says, be atheist. I think I am that. Extreme says, read this comment if you've been kidnapped. I'm not kidnapped. Taka says, Jesus is the way. Thank you, but I don't believe in that. Yazdan says, just spill the beans already. Reveal it. Reveal what? Femboy Stormtrooper says, who's your favorite lolcow? I mean, people don't really consider him a lolcow, but I think Bobby Fischer is almost like fits the box. But like official lolcow, probably Terry Davis. Ghazi says Among Us. Okay. Full Circle says it puts lotion on the skin. Is that a meme? What's that? iHead says, well, if it isn't Silvio Manfred Dante, I look like that guy, whoever that is. Okay. Dream Man says, you've only done 28 of these. I've done more, but I hid them. MS says, he's a deeply suppressed gay. Sure. Devo says, Silence of the Lambs reference. Someone referenced Silence of the Lambs. Okay. None of your business says the lotion quote is from Silence of the Lambs. Okay. I don't. I've seen the movie, but I don't remember the quote. Glacial says my grandma just did a backflip. I don't believe that. Big Mac says, where are the bodies, Don? I don't kill people. Lewis says, W speed, W speed, W speed. Okay. Kathleen says, ooh, okay, laughing out loud. Okay. Undying says, Lewis, shut up with the spamming. You don't like the spam? Okay. Unknown says, hello, Clarice. Okay. Devos Finance says, freaked out suspicious emoji. Femboy Stormtrooper says Buffalo Bill says it to the lady in the hole. Okay, I don't remember it still. Extreme says, did you go to college? Maybe. Someone says, I think there's a trans man trapped between those ears. I mean, no. T-Money says, do you just do this every day? I do. Crucial says, can someone explain why every other stream is either a deranged Bible thumper or a emote spamming bot? I think you're exaggerating. I think there's more stuff out there, but I guess that stuff makes money. Mohammed says, are you a serial killer? No. None of your business says, do you experience emotions? Do you laugh, cry? Yes. Femboy Stormtrooper says, I'm neither of those things. What? Tyler says, tell an interesting story. I'm not gonna do that. T-Money says, did he just wake up? No. River says, what happens if they don't put the lotion on? I don't remember the movie. Chiptree says, Dawn. Hello, Chiptree. Dream Man says, emoji, what the hell is this? It's a throwing baby emoji. None of your business says, what's the grade school project you're the most proud of? An essay I wrote about technology and its bad effects. Damnation says, who's your favorite comedian? I'm not too into comedians, but I guess Norm Macdonald. Kansas says, sup, dude. Hello, Kansas. Dream Man says, throwing baby emoji. Okay. You ready says, got a touch of the tism. No. Thrift says, Don once saved me from a burning building. Thank you for saving my life, Donny boy. I never did that. Jacqueline says, hello. Wave emoji. Hello, Jacqueline. Lewis says, good night, Father Don. Good night, Lewis. Genuine says, neighbor missing a lot of chat. I am sorry. CTG says, what happens if you eat 7 to 10 pounds of fibrous fruit? I don't know. Lego says, anyone here gay or just me? Well, there is someone named Femboy Stormtrooper in the chat, so I imagine maybe he is. Malcolm says, you look very sad. I'm not sad. Chiptree says, when did people start calling you Father Don? You be sounding like a Catholic priest now. People think it's funny to say that this is a cult, which I guess it is kind of funny. Femboy says, I'm a little fruity. Okay. Psycho says, did you know that when nacho cheese on chip, cheese chip on nacho? What? Jaren says, I like your wig. It's not a wig. Don't ask me to pull my hair. JW says, this is act. Nice try. It's not. Ghazi says, who would win 5,000 monkeys or 50 men? 5,000 monkeys. Nosfez says, why don't women wear skirts in the winter? Nof says, so their lips don't chap. Okay. Undying says, because it's cold. That's your answer to the thing I just read? Okay. Damnation says, what's the last good movie you saw? Well, it's not a movie, but I've been watching Pluribus, the TV show. Thrift says, what's heavier, 600 pounds of rocks or 600 pounds of feathers? I mean, I've heard that before, so I know they're the same. I wonder, though, if I hadn't have heard that before, if I would have been stupid enough to say rocks. Kaysen says, tell me why my mouth is so dry when I wake up in the morning. I don't know why. Femboy says, ever see the footage of Mike Tyson play wrestling a 600-pound white Bengal tiger? No, but that sounds interesting. Chiptree says, I'm so brain rotted when someone says anything with 6 in it, I think of 6'7". I mean, it's unavoidable not to think about that, you know, if you're on the internet. MS super chatted $2 Australian. Thank you, MS. MS says, what is your romance life like? I mean, I really keep that private, you know. I really keep that private. I feel bad for not answering a super chat, but I don't know what to say considering I want to keep it private. Sorry, MS, but thank you for your Australian dollars. Ghazi says GTA 6 is delayed. Yeah, I have heard about that. MS says, ha 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 ha, that's okay. Thumbs up emoji. Glad you're not frustrated. Undying says, do you think doom scrolling is a serious addiction? Yeah. Someone says he's dating his right hand. You're referencing masturbation? Okay. ES says you look like Jetpack Joyride dude. Is it because of the hair? Okay. Mystery comment says you should wear a priest clerical collar under your shirt for one stream for Father Don followers. That would be funny, but that's not my thing. I'm not that kind of silly. Captain says, what's your top 5 to 1 TV shows? I mean, I just watched the Walking Dead pilot, and I thought that was pretty good. Or at least I enjoyed it. Xavier says hi. Hello, Xavier's. Undying says, so jealous of your straight teeth, so straight. Thank you. Plays says, do you remember me, bro? I'm sorry, I don't. Cody says, sup, dude, what time is it where you at? I'm not going to say, but it is nighttime. Anime says, have you watched AOT? AOT? I don't know what that is. Carl says, do you eat powdered laundry detergent? No, I think that would be really unhealthy. Femboy says the Walking Dead pilot is the best episode of the entire series. Yeah, that's a thing that I think happens with TV shows sometimes. Chiptree says, did you finish watching TV before streaming? I was watching YouTube videos. EJ says Boo-Haas or Teletubbies. Well, I don't know what Boo-Haas is, so I guess Teletubbies. Danny says, I have a riddle. I have keys but no doors. I have space but no room. You can enter but you can't go outside. What am I? I don't know. I don't think it's like a physical thing. I don't know. I'm not going to think about it, sorry. Seki says, sir, my mother is a big fan of you. Huh, that's weird. Chiptree says, answer to Danny's riddle, a computer keyboard. Keys. Okay, I get it now. That's cool. Play says, you look like the type of guy to play Brain Rot Geometry Dash, knows coding, and eat marshmallows barefoot. No, not at all. Texas says, good morning, cow eyes. Cow eyes. Hello. No Name says, what's your hobby, bro? Video editing. Max says, hi, Don. How have things been? Hello, Max. Good. I'm pretty sure you're a live stream fiend, aren't you? You watch other live streams. Carl says, if socks were currency, how much money would you have? Well, I have like 8 pairs of socks. Ghazi says, what's your favorite country? Well, I think Vatican City is interesting. Someone says his nose flares when he passes gas. That's not true. Rainey says, how do you describe the color purple to a blind person? I don't know. Rich, extravagant. Femboy says, if I had to participate in the you look like this person comments, I'd say you look like the guy that played young Bruce Wayne in the Gotham TV show. Okay, I don't know who that is. Yeehaw says, what's your favorite minority to racially abuse? I don't do that. Jamal says, Don, my Hispanic king, did you like my edit? I haven't watched it yet, sorry. Donna says, Friday is the name of the horse. Okay. Mystery Comment says, is Stomp now in jail for taking Jacqueline hostage? I don't think so. Bree says, are you fidgeting with scissors? I am. Anthony C says, don't eat that. Are you talking about the scissors? I'm not going to do that. Chris says, DaVinci or Final Cut Pro? Well, I've usually used Sony Vegas 14 for video editing, but I want to switch to Premiere Pro. Chiptree says, is Jamal Daquifa the OG from the first stream? He wasn't here for the first stream, but he was here for the early streams. Like, Femboy says, have you ever ran with scissors? No. Deacon says, please just give me a little bit of your skin or hair. I want to know what it smells like. For $1,000, I'll do that. My hair, that is. Boyong says, are you gay? No. Adam says, what is this nonsense? That's a rhetorical question. Jamal Daquifa says, Don, my Hispanic Latino king, did you like my new edit of you? I haven't watched it. Someone says Don is in the Diddy court photos. Thankfully not. Chess says, hey, my friend Jenna and I got into an argument over economic policies, and now she won't talk to me. That sounds silly. Boyong says, good boy. Why are you calling me that? River says, at what point does this get uncomfortable? When I've been doing it for 8 hours. Chiptree says, Don, my Hispanic Latino king, did you like my new edit of you? You're copying Jamal's comment? Okay. Max says, Don, are you more of a flight or fight type of person? Probably flight. Ghazi says, what if Diddy comes to your house? Call the police. Brian says, go to sleep. Not now. Raphael says, Don, my Hispanic Latino king, did you like my new edit of you? You're copying Jamal's comments too? Okay. T-Money says, do you drive? Yes. Boyong says, are you a good boy? In what way? Chris says, crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentations of their women. That's intense. Eric says, what is your favorite kind of cheese? I don't know, American. Julia says, are you holding a knife? No, scissors. Ghazi says, I got your address for real? Well, okay. Druni says, I don't know if I should study for my exam tomorrow. You probably should. Ethan says, were you an iPad kid? No. Femboy says that was a Conan the Destroyer quote. Oh, the lamentations of your woman, that was that? Okay. Bully McGuire says, have you made any money from this? If so, how much? I've gotten like 250. Linda says, I thought the scissors were magnets. It's scissors. Ghazi says, I am coming. I hope not. T-Money says, what's your favorite color? Gray. Someone says Don is in the Diddy court photos. I'm not. Anakin says, do you enjoy doing this? Moderately. EJ says, are your SWAT cams ready to capture content? What's SWAT cams? River says, knock knock. Who's there? Carl says, Flat Earth Society. You believe in Flat Earth? Okay. Mr. Beetle says, who would win in a fight? Jason Voorhees versus Freddy Krueger? Freddy Krueger. T says, what are those scissors cutting? Air. Donut says, what is your favorite food? The Big Mac. Alicia says, vampire. Convince me I'm wrong. I don't have to. I don't care to. Jacho says, is the world flat? I don't think so. Silent says, do you have a personality? I mean, everyone does. Braden says, who would win, Dante or Kratos? Dante. Chris says AMD or NVIDIA for 4K rendering. I mean, I use NVIDIA. Ethan says, I have a question. What is it? Someone says Don was raised by two Scientologist dads. No, but that sounds interesting if it were the case. Justice says beans. Okay. Thrift says, Don, my Hispanic king. What do I do if my side chick is pregnant? I'm not the person to ask. Jetro says, are you gay? I'm straight. Akuma says, Diddy is your real brother. No, he's not. Ghazi says, I am coming. Don't come to my house. Femboy Stormtrooper says, do you have any interest in fighter jets? My interest in them goes as far as playing GTA 5 and breaking into the military base with that jump and getting a jet. That's as far as my interest goes. Sweet says, do you like chicken tandoori? No. Vanny says, jump please. I'm not gonna do that. Someone says something in Japanese. I don't know what that means. Zombie says, have you seen Edward Scissorhands the movie? No. Dark says, can you say, when the beast gets angry, the weak shall quiver? There you go. Jacob says, skibbity toilet Ohio Riz. Okay. D's Nuts says, yes, gimme beans. I'm not giving beans. Lit says, Mike Hawk Ishmael. Funny. Eliza says, how's life? You look like you've gone through a rough day. I'm perfectly fine. Mystery Comment says, did you watch Even Stevens? I haven't. Jacqueline says, which YouTube video were you watching? Well, one of them was of David Blaine. Harrison says, then put the scissors down, bud. I like playing with them. Bully says, what games do you play? I play Minecraft. Chiptree says the sigh before saying Mike Hawksmall. Yeah, I knew it was coming. Harrison says, oh, that's the tism. I don't think so. Femboy says, I had a rubbish day today, but fuck it, we ball. Nice. Thrift says, my Hispanic king son, I'm 38. Am I too old to get my foreskin cut off? That seems pretty old. Carl says, we want to throw frozen bean burritos at you. I don't want that. Texas says, no beard on your face. How long have you been transgendy? I mean, I've been clean shaven for like a year and a half. Before that, I wasn't so, I would have little facial hair. Chiptree says, throw those burritos at me. I want free food. I can't control that. J-Man says, who would win in a fight, Jesus or Buddha? Buddha. Da Vinci says, how old are you? Well, I am an adult, that's all I say. Yazdan says, bro, why do you have scissors? Because doing something with my hands makes this less boring. Hi Emo says, watchable do on YouTube. What? River says, that man 24 or 23? Maybe. Hayden says, look up Sully Cormer. You look like him. I'm not gonna do that. Da Vinci says Rubik's Cube. It'd be cool if I had a Rubik's Cube here. Texas says Don should get a dog. I don't like pets. Column says he low-key looked like the vampire from Twilight. Okay. Someone says ever toot and smirk. No, I frown and feel ashamed. Ruben says, I just moved into the same block as you and saw you driving down the road. Hello, neighbor. No, you didn't. Thrift says, you should play with your meat while you talk to us. Masturbate while live streaming. No. Brian says, this guy is secretly mentally ill. Secretly? I think I'm fine. Kelt says, fidget spinner perhaps? Hello, young Don. Why fidget with a fidget spinner when you can fidget with anything? MS says, I knew you experience guilt and shame. I do. Brezia says, bro, notice me? Do you still remember me? I do. Rainbot says, what's your ethnicity? I call myself Latino and Hispanic. Femboy Stormtrooper says, my favorite fidget device, a Zippo lighter. A Zippo lighter? Okay. Chris says H.265 or H.264. 264. Lord says, are you reading chat because you have no content of your own, so you need other people to make yourself seem interesting? I mean, I don't think it's that black and white, but I think that maybe there's some truth in that. Dark says, can you say, when we water the seeds, the neighbor? What? Carl says, you hang out by the urinals in public restrooms? I don't. Hunter says, have you violated anyone today? Well, I killed a fly a second ago, so. North says, today we steal the moon. You're quoting Gru? Okay. Femboy says, do you think that butterfly knives are cool? I forget what that is. Is that in CSGO? I mean, I'm sure in real life too, but. Fred says, sell advertising on your forehead, Don? No, that's degrading. Anthony says, hi, guys. Hello, Anthony. Captain says, say suspicious black male just for fun. I did there. I condemn your comment. Harrison says, hey man, jokes aside, you have potential. Please don't let the chat affect your personal mental health. Well, it hasn't yet, so I think I'm probably in the clear. Like, J-Man says, you ever watch the cartoon Pinky and the Brain? No. Da Vinci says, what's your IQ? I don't know. I haven't taken a test. Ruben says, if you don't believe me, I'll drop an envelope in your mailbox. Go ahead. Chiptree says, no fiber cream today. I did put product in my hair, but it didn't seem to work. Kieran says, please say, wake up, your tummy is empty, so fill it. Reach in the fridge for the bacon and skillet. Cool. Texas says, take a sip of the Pepsi, Don. I don't have Pepsi. Captain says, have you seen Lord of the Strings? Do you mean rings? I have seen the rings. Liberto says, good morning, Jimmy. Did you get pegged today? My name's not Jimmy, and I did not get pegged. Mystery says, who wants to see Don stab a Coke can? I'm not going to do that. Kelt says, a few more months and he will look like Eraserhead. I don't think so. I want to comb it more often and make it clean. I like professionalism. Zaraban says, why do you do this every day, Donald? I mean, the main reason is, I don't know. I just have an urge. Rico says, if you could be in any fictional universe, which one would it be? Pluribus. Chiptree says, do you watch Loaf? I used to, kind of. Femboy says, I'm having my first snowfall of the year right now. Cool. Chris says, Steam Machine or the PlayStation 5 Pro? Steam Machine. River says, The Urge, his dark passenger. What? Brian says, if you were female for a day, what would you do? I mean, I would probably faint, like, if that happened. I wouldn't be able to comprehend that happened. Devin says, does the chat ever make you laugh? Sometimes. AD says, what's the thing that will make a young man waste his most precious years doing this? Genuinely asking. I mean, I imagine it relates to technology, the internet, social media addiction, video games. Rico says, what's a moral you stand by? I I don't know if I have that. I do have a conscious though, but not like a sentence, like a 530 says, have you drank beer before? Maybe. Someone says, have you ever soiled yourself? I mean, when I was a toddler, but not in recent years. Da Vinci says, do you think we are creating a new life form with AI? Yes. Devin says, morals like don't steal, cheat, or lie type-ish. I mean, I want to say I believe in don't lie, don't cheat, but I don't know how truthful that is of me. Chiptree says, I think you give more low fives than Matthew vibes, but less chaotic than the two. I mean, I don't know. AD says, I hope you have a great day, brother. Thank you. Liberto says, are you dead ass for real? With what? Brian says, you live with your parents? Maybe. Thrift says, Dawn, my king, how thick are you? What's your girth like? I'm not gonna say my penis dimensions. Ripster says, I lie, I cheat, I steal. Okay. Biv says, bro talks like Sam Sulek. Who's that? Is that a bodybuilder? Alicia says, what sphere of endeavor currently occupies the majority of your time? I mean, I try to keep like personal things private, but one of them is wasting time on the internet, watching videos. Ashley says your eyes are big. I guess they are. Sofla says, would you meet me? I mean, considering you're a stranger, no. Carl says, please change your soiled underwear. It's not soiled. Jacqueline says, yes, he's a YouTuber bodybuilder. Sam Sulek is a YouTube bodybuilder. Okay. Femboy says, thoughts on Vosh and Foldergate? Is that when he accidentally revealed on stream that he had like bestiality or like anime kid stuff? I guess that's pretty bad. I mean, I never was a fan of his, so I don't care too much. Da Vinci says, thoughts on BCIs? I don't know what that is. Mystery says, do you have an internal monologue? I think so. Brian says, thoughts on people who have an OF? I don't dislike them. I'm indifferent. Slumdog says, why are you so serious? It's just the way my personality is. Beetroot says, hey, cutie patootie. Hello, Beetroot. Decade says, if every back shot was 5,000, how many you taken? I would make $0 from that prompt. Chocolate says, do you support Chris Benoit? I don't know who that is. Flute says, this seems like you're putting on an act. I mean, I will say that I'm not forcing myself to be like a character. The way I am right now is the way my mind is like naturally is right now. River says, just say no. I don't support Chris Benoit. You don't support him? I mean, I don't even know who he is. Jay says, why your hair like that? Because I'm not, I'm not disciplined in appearance, unfortunately. Tita says, hey Don, I just got here. What's going on? As usual, randomness. Carl says, I have diarrhea running down my legs. Sorry. Femboy says, Chris Benoit was a WWE wrestler that snapped and killed his family. Wow, that's sad. MS says, I do think he's genuinely introverted and awkward. You're talking about me? Okay. Max says he's serving face card though. Okay. Desnut says, damn, we in a wrestling mood. Everybody WWE, huh? I guess we are talking about it. Brian says thoughts on BBL. Is that Brazilian butt lift? I mean, I'm never gonna get one. Grady says King Kong Bundy. What? Tita says, I think you are super smart, so why am I doing this? I don't know. It's just an urge I have. Mystery says, let's get ready to rumble. Okay. Grasshopper says, can you cure AIDS? I don't have that power. Brian says, thoughts on gay people. Happy for those guys. Ecto says, Jimmy Yang Wang. Okay. Rico says, read my question, bro. You're gonna have to send it again. Tita says, to answer questions, tell us about you if you want to. Sorry. Raggy says, I love your energy, brother. Thank you. Costco says, read my question. You're gonna have to send it again. Call Me says, do you have a crush? No. Mystery says, have you seen the movie They Live? No, but I have seen clips of it. I get the idea. He has glasses on. He can see the truth. Noreen says, do you work? What do I do? I keep that private. Lucas says, dude, I know I've seen you on Be Here before. Well, I stream every day, so that would make sense. Femboy says, They Live is a great flick. Okay. You're calling it a flick, not a movie? Eric says, my favorite monotone Mexican. Hey, Don. Hello, Eric. Grady says, Andre the Giant. Okay. Tita says, my grandpa was Don Pancho. I don't know who that is. Samantha says, he does have charisma. I do? Okay. Mr. Carter says, hey, you still eating hot dogs without the bun? No. Ripster says, ever seen Extreme Justice? Nope. Sen says, what's this channel about? Just me reading messages. Desnut says, I'm gonna 619 Don. What does that mean? Costco says, read my question. Just send it again. Doug says, are you an eraser? No. Thrift says, Don, my king, I just contracted herpes. Should I let my wife know? You should. Tita says, Elon's kid number 18. Haha, that you're calling me that? Funny. Miss says, you're awesome. Thank you. Grim says, happy International Spaghetti Day. Thank you. Femboy Stormtrooper says, ever think about making a Discord fan server? Maybe I will. I was thinking about, no, I was certain I wasn't going to do that, but maybe I will. SM says, my great-great-grandfather died 1,000 years ago. That's not possible. Kelt says, liver will grow back. Stop drinking. What? Chocolate says, would you give homeless people broken cameras? I wouldn't be that cruel as Matan was. I would give working cameras. Lucas says, Don, how can we be as handsome as you? I don't know, genetics. Q says, are you schizophrenic? No. Brian says, my grandma has toe fungus. You. Tommy says, good morning from Sweden. Have a nice day. Thank you. Rico says, if you could save one parent, which one are you saving? I don't want to think about that. Giuliano says, working cameras are too expensive. That's fair. How about we just give money? How about that? Jordan says, my pet rock got elbow cancer. That's not possible. Femboy Stormtrooper says, do you have any pets? Yes. Justice for Beans says, justice for beans, justice for beans. What does that mean? Rico says, yeah, bro, you answer that question, but not my other one. Are you typing something vulgar? Sometimes YouTube will just block it. Like, I can't even see it. Kelt says, have you ever got busy in a Burger King bathroom? Intercourse in a Burger King bathroom? No. Robert says, do you even sleep? Yes. Lady says, why would you give a homeless person money? Because I've been told that it's a nice thing to do. Flick says hi. Hello, Flick. Max says, how energetic are you from 1 to 10? 6. Chiptree says, you ever had a moment where you laughed too hard that your body hurt? I'm sure, but I can't remember it. Costco says, just put the fries in the bag, bro. Okay. MS says, Flick what? Your click? Someone in the chat is named Flick. Chris says Nikon ZR or Nikon Z6. ZR. Taylor says, can you make me smile? I can't. I'm the wrong person for that. Brooke says, ho? What? Sir Inline says, are you being held hostage? No. Femboy says, are you staying hydrated? No, I keep on forgetting to drink water. Thrift says, I'm so sleepy, Don, but I can't stop watching you, my king. Just go to sleep. Brian says, do you play games? Not often. Costco says, the last kid #1. What does that mean? Call Me Sky says, my friend says, you have nice eyebrows. Thank you, Call Me Sky's friend. Ruin says, drink beer, be a man. Thanks for the recommendation. Kelt says, 1 is the loneliest, blank what? Number. Rico says, I tried to make my question PG, but I guess it didn't work. I'm not saying it. Mystery says, beans is from Even Stevens. You gotta type that in on YouTube, Google. I'm not gonna type that. Tita says, I love when he gets bossy. Tell me to go sleep again. I mean, if you should go to sleep, you should go to sleep. River says, Hugh Janus. Okay. MS says, have you taken any personality test? No. Daniel says, you look miserable. Okay. Ashley says, ew, who compared him to Charlie Kirk? I don't know who did. Ripster says, gonna get a haircut soon. I don't plan to. Costco says, are you alone? At the moment. Flick says, my grandpa broke his leg. Sorry to hear that. McLove says, do you neatly fold your pants before farting? No comment. Mystery says, it's just a Disney TV show from the 2000s. I can't be bothered to Google anything. MS says, DNA ancestry helps you know your personality better. That sounds superstitious. Live chat says live chat. Okay. Alicia says, do you find the semantic complexity of this lexicon to be readily apprehensible, or does the erudite register present any hermeneutic impediments? Hermeneutic impediments. Giuliano says, 6 months from now, what would you like this stream to look like? I have some ideas. I was thinking about selling out and doing vertical streams and playing video games. But I'm also torn. I think I should stick with this because this is kind of original, kind of unique. Chris says Gibson or Fender. Fender. Flick says, can you call me Flick Flaw, not just Flick? Since you ask, I'll do it. I'll try to at least. Boyong says, Don, are you gay? I'm straight. Max says, we love your smile, Don. Okay. Daniel says, you could do both at the same time, read chat while playing video games. Yeah, I mean, I guess so, but so many other people do that. I think this is an unusual kind of stream. This is basic, like simple, but at the same time it's unusual, so I kind of like this. Killian says, why are you up this late? It's my lifestyle. Boyong says, all right, good boy. Okay. Chi says, 2 guys, 1 stream. That sounds gross. Femboy says, ever see a UFO fighting? No, I don't really believe in UFOs. 530 says, you forced yourself to blink. Maybe I should. I feel like I'm not blinking enough. Flick Flash says, can you make a gaming channel? Well, I was thinking about just doing video games on this channel. Maybe. It feels like selling out, though. Beam says, what denomination of Asian are you? Latino. She says, your undershirt is backwards. Is it? It might be. I don't think it is. Derek says, who is this nerd? My name is Don, and I do streams like this daily. Tita says, do you speak other languages? No. Rico says, do you hate corporate franchises? I mean, I want to say yes, but I give money to them, so I guess not. Ripster says, Chi got you, bro? Yeah, they did. Mr. Lone says, why do you dress like a white boy? I don't know. It's not intentional, just my style. Charlie says, Glenn from Chucky. I look like that? Okay. Brian says, someone is telling me to get into his van for free V-Bucks. Don't do it. Alicia says, is there any individual amongst this assemblage whose perceptual faculties have been obtuned by the intricacy of the nomenclature employed in my recent disquisition? I don't know what that means. Seems kind of pretentiously worded, if you ask me. Boyong says, should I sub Don? I mean, if you want to see more future streams, then yeah. Brian says, I thought you were a lesbian, but you figured I was male eventually? Okay. Rico says there's someone behind you. No, there isn't. Debug says hello, Donnie boy. Hello, Donnie. I mean, Debug. A fellow DB. Adam says, don't you have a real job? Diddy Donnie? I don't want to say. Ashley says, can we all have a Zoom movie night? Probably not. Summer says, can you help me do math? No, ask ChatGPT. Mr. Lone says, do you use a 5060? Is that a GPU? I don't. Boyong says, I subbed. Okay. Ripster says, movie night would be tight. It doesn't really interest me. And even if it did, there would definitely be some dude who would, like, play porn in there. So. MS says, who cares what he does? We like him. Okay. Femboy says, do you fear the sun or sun flares? Not at all. Wolf says, ChatGPT is why your generation will never learn anything. There's truth in that. Deathbat says, don't you want somebody to love? Don't you want somebody to love? Is that a lyric? Adam says, thanks for letting me waste my time for asking a question that you won't answer, crying emoji. Sorry about that. I guess that kind of was a letdown. Me just not answering. Brian says, you're a control freak, huh? I don't know if I am or not. Person says, you look like my math teacher. Okay. Kelt says 6-7 thing is overplayed. Maybe it is. iDod says, how many hours you spent? What do you mean? Type Shit says, is your whole channel just nonchalant? Well, my whole channel is this, so I guess so. Nation says, is Yahweh king? I don't believe in God. Thrift says, Don, my king, please consider letting me feed you grapes and allowing me to sleep next to you. No, I'm not interested, but I like the image of someone feeding me grapes. J-Man says, at Ripster, peace out, brother. You're saying goodbye to someone else in the chat? Okay. Femboy says, are you hungry right now? No. Brezia says, fix your hair. I'm not going to do that. Rico says, I hate this generation's brain rot. I want to say that too, but to be honest, deep down, I think I kind of enjoy it, unfortunately. Lady A says, what kind of human turns you on? Humans that look dissimilar to me. Mystery says, she's got a smile that it seems to me reminds me of childhood memories. That's definitely a lyric. I don't know where it's from. iDod says, have you got into an accident lately? A car accident? Almost, but no, I didn't. Chris says, will ultimate frisbee ever become an Olympic sport? Yes. Someone says, you are so beautiful, you are everyone. I need you to be with everyone. I, the creator of my songs. What? Ashley says, can we all watch A Clockwork Orange? I'm not gonna host a movie night. Rico says, do a meet and greet, bro. No. J-Man says, pseudoscience or real science? Mainstream science. Roblox says, great movie. Roblox Plays says, A Clockwork Orange is a great movie. Okay. Jacqueline says, hosting a movie night, laughing emoji. You think the idea is amusing? Okay. Debug says, when you think, is there a little voice in your head, or do you just visualize everything? I mean, I think both. But Jay says, I hope you are having a good night, Don. I am. I don't know why, but I feel like saying this. Jay, your red profile picture is just, I find it striking. Femboy says, do you like old action movies like Demolition Man or Predator? I enjoyed watching Predator. Greenlight says, I sold a half kilo of Coke yesterday. Okay. Moo Cow says, do you need a moderator? I don't. Jacqueline says, the hosting a movie night is funny because there's like 100 of us. Yeah. MS says $2. What? Ashley says, okay, fine. I'll host the movie night. Go ahead. Eric says, ever fart and hold your head under the blanket? No, that sounds disgusting. Rad says, how much money did we make tonight? $2. Someone says, I say my computer monitor just turned off. Now it's back on. Someone says, I say, may all the laughter be the portion of your lips, the refuge of the difficult moment. May all my wishes be yours. What? Kelt says, 2 shirts bulks him up. He has a 3rd shirt under those. It's only 2. Lady A says, you look like your mom, don't you? Maybe. Mr. Lone says, how do you read the comments? With my computer monitor. Femboy says, I watched Hobo with a shotgun with people on Discord last night. It was fun. I've never watched something on Discord, I don't think. Like a movie. When people host movie nights, are other people's microphones on? How does that work? Or is there just a chat, a text chat? Foxy says to get a job. Okay. Moog says, I feel like you were my childhood friend like 28 years ago. I don't think so. Mystery says, Don, when someone tells you they sell drugs, you gotta say, what's my cut? No. Femboy says, there's a text chat and people usually mute themselves. Okay. Do other people, like, is it proper to have your camera on? Is that like a thing people do? Like a Zoom class thing? Debug says, Don, next stream you should wear 3 shirts. No, I'm not gonna do that. Appalachia says hi. Hello, Appalachia. Max says, Don, do you get social anxiety even online? I mean, I barely have any anxiety online. You guys are just text, so it's easy to not feel anything. iDod says, is teacher teach us or the school teach teacher? What? Vivian says, do you have any fears? Car crashes? Mystery says, Don, how about for every $20 super chat you put on another shirt? I'm not really into challenges. That's not my thing. Rico says, can you wear a maid costume next stream? For $1 million, I'll do it. YD says, do you smoke? No. Someone says, I love your eyes, I worship them all. You are the balm for all my wounds. I shouldn't be. Foxy says, why don't you play games and play with your fans? That sounds interesting, but maybe I will. Maybe tomorrow. Marna says, WTF, you're confused by this live stream. Okay. J22 says, Dawn, buy me a vape. I'm not gonna do that. Jacqueline says, YouTube won't let a donation go through 1 million. I know, we would figure out a different payment method. Rico says, bro is selling out for the 1 million, crying emoji. Selling out? I mean, I guess I am, but it's for 1 million. I think if it was for like 1,000, you should be concerned. Femboy says, don't put a price tag on the maid dress. You don't want to end up like Finster. That's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, I don't really know the Finster situation thing, but maybe I should have like morals. And the Thug says, how often do you wash your hair? On average, like every 2 days. Rad says, you are missing out on money, you asshole. Yeah. Sly says, is it better to be kind and not truthful, or truthful and not kind? I mean, I think you gotta be both. Thug says, you seem extra social today. I do? Okay. Rollick says, of will fit you. What? Chris says FSR or XESS. I don't know what that is, but XESS because there's an X in it. Khalifa says, assume nothing, communicate everything, random wisdom. Huh, I don't really get it. Jim says, what's better than roses on a piano? What? Maximus says, listen, man, Jim, 4 times a week. Thanks for the advice, but no thank you. Brian says, that Fetty ain't gonna buy itself. Fetty, is that slang for fentanyl? I'm not interested in that anyways. Sponge says, my name is Gabe Owners, and my favorite food is hot dogs. Okay. Rico says, did you ever party during high school? Not much. Max says, would you ever go skydiving? No. Not says, I swear some people are trying to make you say a sleeper agent call, hoping for something to happen. Yeah, it seems like that. The M says, you do seem like you're in a better mood. Nice. Rad says, you give me zesty vibes. Okay. Kelt says murder because I was trying to kill a fly there. It was a failed murder though. Appalachia says, was that you applauding the chat for asking good questions? I mean, it might as well like been, because the chats have been pretty good so far. Not Very Lean says, do you scream at babies in public? No, not like poor things. Kelt says, better luck next time, son. Thank you. Someone says, what did you bring? You took my heart instead. You came to me like autumn. You came to my door. What? Don't Ask says, hey man, what are some of your hobbies? Video editing. Rico says, do you think most babies are ugly? I haven't really thought about that. I mean, no. Mr. Lone says, if I were to give you a decent GPU for free, would you give me a shout out? I don't have a P.O. box, so that's impossible, but yeah, I would accept it, yeah, if I had a P.O. box. Don't Ask says, what do you enjoy most about video editing? I like the fact that I can express my personality through it. Marna says, you need Jesus? Maybe, but I don't think that's real. Mystery says, if someone gave you money to order Uber Eats live stream, would you do it? I would do it for a drink. I don't want to eat on stream. I think that's gross. 530 says, have people recognized you in public? No, I'm a really small YouTuber. Carl says, stop squeezing people's colostomy bags. I don't do that. Rico says, would you pay $30 to save my life? Or would you let me kaput? I would give the $30. Roland says, do you smoke weed? No. Don't Ask says, I have a friend who wants to get into video editing, but he doesn't know what software to start with. It sounds like he doesn't actually care about video editing. If he cared about it, he would have just chose some random one and just got started immediately. MS says, Don just wants a lot of hugs. Maybe. Fawaz says, would you rather smoke crack or double it and give it to the homeless population? No comment. Not Very Lean says, do you use DaVinci Resolve editing software? I use Sony Vegas 14 currently. Aaron says, bro is cute today. Okay. Tyler says, would you rather be a sheep or a goat? A sheep. Just a Viewer says, is that a wig? No. The M says, I don't read everyone's message, okay? That's true. Lady A says, are you waiting until marriage? I mean, I'm not Christian, so it's not important to me. Rico says, you're a W YouTuber, bro. Thank you. Mystery says, Don, that counts as saying double it and give it to the homeless population? Whatever. Unknown says, go to bed? No. Max says, what's something you're good at that most people don't notice, Don? I don't know. Maybe you can answer. Abdullah says, stay Jewish. I will. Idod says, what's the most awkward baby photo you have? I'm not gonna say. Tyler says, would you rather be a follower or a leader? I guess leader. Jacqueline says, yes, one thing you have a good memory. I do. Okay. Reggie says, did you take Prozac today? No. Rye says, is this paying off? I mean, my brain enjoys this, so I guess so. Fawaz says, would you rather watch the first 20 minutes of Lord of the Rings or fold the dishes? Do you mean clean the dishes? I mean, if the dishes need cleaning, I guess I would clean those, but I would rather watch Lord of the Rings. Debug says, Don, how could you were a brother to me, how could you sleep with my wife? I didn't do that. Chocolate says, bro, you look like Glenn from Chucky. Okay. Mick says, earth emoji, ant emoji. I don't know what that means. Aaron says, bro is so buff, he folds the dishes. Muscle emoji. Huh. Someone says, pray that my heart may be at peace. Pray that if you do not remember me, you have turned your gaze towards our Qibla. What? Fawaz says, would you rather eat a small bag of assorted nut mix or take a sip of Dasani water? Dasani water. Not Very Lean says, would you rather lose a leg or an arm? A leg. Roblox says hi. Hello, Roblox. iDod says, why 6 afraid of 7? 7, 8, 9. I've heard that 1,000 times. FDA says, what's wrong with you? Are you slow? I don't think I'm slow, but maybe. Abram says, iPhone emoji. Computer emoji. Okay. Sauce says, why are you doing this? My brain enjoys it. Hit Night says, what's your interest currently? Streaming. Appalachia says, what are you holding? A keyboard rest to like rest my wrist on when I type. Rico says, are you looking forward to GTA 6 at all? Yeah, to be honest, I am. To be honest. Rye says, how many hours per day do you go live? Usually 2. Mystery says, Stomp is in YouTube jail. His channel is on death row. Is that true? Max says, do you think AI is destroying our society? No. Femboy says, if you had to erase either Star Wars or the MCU from all human knowledge, which one would you get rid of? MCU, obviously. Sean says, the real muh face. Muh face, is that a meme? Robert says, what time is it for you? It's nighttime, that's all I'm gonna say. Loss says, how do you feel about Glock 5 models? You look like Christopher Walken. I don't have an opinion on that. MS super chatted $2 Australian. Thank you, MS. MS says, do you like roleplay servers? No, not at all. I think it's kind of silly, but to be honest, I haven't really given them a try, so maybe if I were to give it a try, I would realize this is not stupid, but it looks stupid to me. Kelt says, we scraped the last 3 Star Wars movies. You didn't like them? Okay. Marna says, do you have a friend or are you bored? I'm not bored. Nobody says, glad you monetize, bro. Thank you. Apple says, 2 truths and a lie. I'm not gonna do that, sorry. Mitra says, have you taken your daily dose of UV, my plant? No. The M says, read with some personality, bro. That takes too much effort. FDA says, how do you feel about Jesus? I mean, I don't believe in him. I don't think he's divine, but I enjoyed reading the Sermon on the Mount. That was cool. Luminous says, yo, bro, Don Benitez. Hello, Luminous. Creston says, you read just fine, bro. Thank you. Robin says, you have a pet? Yes. Marna says, are you lonely? Am I lonely? I don't think so. J-Man says, Star Trek or Star Wars? I haven't watched Star Trek. Rad says, when was the last time you had a girl grab you by the junk? No comment. FDA says, so you don't think he's burning in hell? I'm not of the camp that thinks that. I don't even think there is a hell. Mitra says, will the AI bubble crash before my grandma? I don't know. Applesauce says, I eat apples. I accidentally almost killed someone and they didn't notice. Your hair is black. What? FDA says there's no hell. I don't believe in like the supernatural or religion. MS super chatted $2 Australian. Thank you, MS. Favorite DC Universe character? As you'd expect. Well, probably Batman because of the Nolan movies, but Christopher Reeve's Superman looks interesting. Maybe if I watched those movies, that would become my favorite. Creston says, what time is it where you are? I'm not going to say, but it is nighttime. Mystery says, maybe in GTA 6 there will be a house that has Don reading chat in his room. I mean, there's definitely going to be live streamers in GTA 6. It'll be cool. Like, there's got to be, like, in GTA 6, people walking around on the sidewalk with, like, phones live streaming. That's got to be a thing. Churi says, are you that robot man from Star Trek? No. Shadow says, do you support my decision in becoming a professional Mongolian throat singer? No, because I don't think you're serious about it. MS super chatted $2 Australian. Thank you, MS. MS says, favorite Star Wars character? Favorite Star Wars character? My favorite Star Wars character. That would be, I don't know, Jabba the Hutt. I think Jabba the Hutt. Loki says, y'all still waiting for GTA 6? Honestly tragic. I get it. It's a really anticipated game. Fawaz says, share a blunt with a gorilla or get head from Rosie O'Donnell? No comment. Ashley says, I was going to say Jabba. Okay. Soup Can says, favorite Star Wars character? Don's fucking Chewbacca. Because of the hair? Okay. Luminous says, is there a full form of Don like Donald? I'm not going to say. Rico says, we got lives, so waiting a little longer for GTA 6 won't hurt. You've got live streams like this, and this quells the pain of the GTA 6 delay. Okay. Marna says, do you have friends or alone all the time? I have friends. Cherry says, eyebrows, you look like Yoda. Okay. iDodd says, would you rather apple in screen right now or eat a lemon? Would I rather eat an apple or a lemon? An apple. Mitra says, is that load-bearing wall behind you? There is a wall behind me. Reggie says, tell us more about your hairline and the hair on your back. I have nothing to tell about it. You can just look at it. TNL says, you play Apex Legends, bro? I used to in 2019. Femboy says, was Ben Affleck's Batman any good? I didn't watch those movies. Jolly says, why are your eyes white? Isn't that normal? Shadow says, do you support the LGBTQIA+? Yeah. Amigo says, my wife left me for a black mailman. What should I do? Be sad. Snate says, I have one eye. Sorry to hear that. Jolina says, hello, Jolina. Debug says, Dawn, I'm homeless now because my load-bearing poster fell down in my house. What? Cherry says, you have streams that are 8 hours long? I do. 2 of them. I have 2 that are about 8 hours long. Mystery says, if you've seen Christian Bale in real life, would you be speechless? No. TNL says, what do you think of Black Ops 7 so far? It looks bad, but still enjoyable. Kelt says, Dawn never goes to the bathroom. I do. I can hold it in for when I live stream. Reggie says, my wife left me for a stray cat. What? Max says, would you meow or bark on stream? I mean, neither, but if I had to, I guess bark. Fortnite says, yo, can you start streaming when you play games? Yeah, maybe I will. Maybe. Fortnite, I already read that. Femboy says, Christian Bale drives the same kind of truck as me. A 2003 Toyota Tacoma. Cool. An old vehicle. The M says, I had the same surgeon as Christopher Reeves. Wow, that's neat. Rainey says, if someone comes to you asking for help and you help them, are you interfering with their karma? No. Not Very Lean says, do you think your computer is going to be able to handle GTA 6? Yeah, but low FPS. Avocado says, bark? No. Fortnite says, what car do you drive? I'm gonna keep that a secret. Caroline says, Call of Duty is the best for 500 subs. Are you saying if I stream Call of Duty, it's not gonna be successful for viewers wise? Robin says, what is the worst question you have been asked? I don't know, but I will say that I kind of dislike getting common questions. JK says, what day of the week is it? Tuesday. Femboy says, JK, millions of people care about Christian Bale. Yeah, to a degree, yeah. Shuri says, are you going to play Wolverine game? No. Reggie says, Steve Wonder taught me how to drive. Okay. Frank says, who cuts your hair? Some random barber. Mr. Lone says, what kind of graphics card do you use? I use a NVIDIA 1060, I think. Marna says, see you later, I'm going to take a shit. Goodbye. Bye, Marna. Daughter says, if there was a supernatural, how do you think people would go to heaven? I don't believe in heaven. Cherry says, is your favorite game Candy Crush? I never got into that game. Baba says 1060's ass. It is? Okay. Rad says, are you going to play the skin flute? Isn't that a penis? No. Not Very Lean says, do you plan to upgrade your computer before GTA 6? I mean, I'm not super hyped for GTA 6, only like a little bit, so I'm not too desperate to. Cashier says, that's not Tom Holland, that's Timmy Hall End. Okay. JK says, what is GTA 6? Do you mean GTA 6? Upcoming video game. JDM says, do you like men? Not romantically. Debug says, how is knowing what car you drive going to help us find your address? Well, if I say my car, like, if someone is suspicious of, like, they think they know the address that I live at, And, never mind. I don't want to talk about this. Patrick says, yo, Playgirl, you still getting slammed? No. Flickflaw says, did you hear Stray.wave? I haven't. Mystery says, have you had a near-death experience? Technically no, but I thought I did. Femboy says, Dan drives a 2017 Ford Fusion. Okay. Mr. Lone says, GTA 6 is going to be trash on PC for at least a few months. Maybe. Max says, do you listen to Daft Punk? I listened to their first album. I enjoyed it. Chameleon says, have you ever done the one chip challenge? No. The M says, I talk very monotone. Okay. Okay. Lockie says, who's your favorite artist? Hieronymus Bosch. J-Man says, Red Hot Chili Peppers or System of a Down. Red Hot Chili Peppers. Baba says, Half-Life 3 soon? I don't think so. Patrick says, you would be a good submarine sailor. You know that, don't you? I don't. AT says, what do you make per month approximately? Is YouTube Live worth it over a job? I mean, it depends. Obviously. There's not much information I can give you. Femboy says, ever step on a thumbtack? No. Chameleon says, what's your favorite animal? Chimpanzee. Josk says, do you like German punk? Never got into it. Flickflash says, it's a song, you should hear it. What's a song that I should hear? Robin says, do you know who invented toilet paper? No. AF says, you remember Schofields tattoos? Nope. iDodd says, truth or dare? Truth. Do you accidentally swear in front of your family? I don't. Patrick says, you probably use a bidet. Are all of your comments just trying to allude that I'm gay? JK says, if you sold toilet paper for a 50% profit, would you be happy? Sure. Jolisha says, favorite superhero? Superman. Well, Batman. AT says, do you make at least $500 per stream? No. I think I could if I sold out, though. Mystery says, just think of the power YouTube algorithm holds. Can make you rich if it wishes to. Okay. Flickflash says, Stray.wave. Maybe I'll listen to it. AF says, make money. Sold out. I mean, I don't know why you're asking me these questions. It's like obvious as to like how much you can make. It seems like you're like daydreaming with the idea of becoming a YouTuber. How about you just stop dreaming about it and just do it or not do it? Nameless says, with a face like that, I would be making a fortune by letting people punch me for $20. You're saying I have a punchable face? Okay. Patrick says, you are a funny guy, you know that, don't you? But looks aren't everything? Okay. Femboy says, any interest in thrill-seeking activities like bungee jumping or parachuting? No. Dawn says nice bed hair. Okay. AT says only 100K plus channels make 500 to 2,000 per stream. I disagree. Luminous says, is it cold there right now? Is it cold here right now? Yes. My computer, my Windows 10 computer just randomly restarted. Maybe it's updating. This is extremely annoying. So now I have to read my comments on my phone, classic style. Mystery comment says, do a practice run on simple challenges for one stream, see how much money it brings in. Maybe, but I dislike challenges. I'm blue. I'm like that blue kid that got blue and then started screaming. Flick says, would you rather be bald or have long, messy hair? Long, messy hair. I apologize for the lack of lighting right now. Reggie says, men or woman? Woman. iDod says, what Pokemon you like? I like Mewtwo. JK says, you look like an Oompa Loompa. Yeah, or Smurf, or an Avatar person. AT says, I will do YouTube live stream, but only while driving. Don't want to be on camera with all these creepy degenerates online. I don't get it. If you are live streaming while driving, aren't you on camera? Paul says, hey, are you an incel? No. Sebastian says, you glaze glizzies, bro? No, I don't roll that way. Jethro says 76. Did you mean to type 67? AT says live stream TTS, not on camera. So your body is not going to be on camera? My keyboard isn't working. Grady says 6'7". Okay. J-Man says Pepsi or Coke. My personal preference is Pepsi. I like Coke. Patrick says, this ain't the first time you blew, don't lie. I don't get it. Follower says, Jesus died for you, Don. I don't believe that, but, thank you. I appreciate it. Val says, I need to know, do you still like microwaves? Yeah, I like microwaves. AT says, just respond to comments like you, but not show face. That sounds unlikely that it's gonna work. Your person, your face, your expressions, your humanity, that's important to getting views. But it could still work. Reggie says, Jesus was deported last week. I don't think so. Max says, would you consider yourself to be kind or honest? Probably honest. Femboy says, if you were in a peak physical condition and a billionaire genius would put you in an armored suit and fight crime, would you do it? Would I do it? No. Why would he choose me? Patrick says, you're going to have a very painful time locked up in the Bing. Are you saying that if I went to prison, I would get raped? Maybe. Hopefully that never happens. I would hate for that to happen. I was streaming like you, AT, not showing my face right there. I tried it out. Kelt says he moves. Yeah, that I did something very unusual on stream and moved. Protecta says, hello, I just joined the stream. What is this about? Just me reading your messages. AT says, aren't you worried about people misusing your image online? No. I mean, celebrities, millions and millions of YouTubers show their face online. Jolena says, ha 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 ha, can't stop laughing. Glad you're enjoying yourself. Sebastian says, are you an alien? No. Cherry says, what superpower would you have? Read minds. Frank says, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Having money. Marlena says, definitely a young version of Jacob's dad, Billy. Okay. Patrick says, you remind me of the villain guy on Green Lantern, the one that wanted the green ring. I can't recall that person. Can't recall. Jolisha says, what would you advise your 20-year-old self to do? I would advise them to bet that GTA 6 is gonna get delayed again. Oh my god. Marlena says, laughing my ass off, you missed my other comment. Sorry. Saddam says, Trump or Putin? No comment. Jacer says, sup, unk? Hello, Jacer. 530 says, have you let people borrow money from you before? Yes, I have. Speedstar says, respond. There you go. DeMarcus says, what's a conspiracy you believe? I used to be into that, but now I'm not. Now I believe in the mainstream media. JK says, can you roast a turkey? Probably not well. No. AT says, did you try TTS while off camera? No. God Sexist says, trauma of drowning. Take deep breaths, hold, exhale for 8 seconds. What? AT says, mainstream is for chumps, mate. Yeah, but I guess I'm a chump. Loki says, what food can you cook? Eggs over easy. That's my main item. Patrick Rowe super chatted $1. Thank you for the $1 American dollar. Speedstar says, you remember me? Check out my channel. I don't remember you. AT says, I used to believe in mainstream and dismiss conspiracy until I got older. We're the opposite. Evan says, pee is stored in the balls. Yes or no? No. Cowboy says, laughing my ass off, Don. You got to learn how to cook more than eggs, bro. Yeah, maybe. Femboy says, when was the last time you threw up? It's been years. I don't remember. Patrick Rowe says, you look like the offspring of something that Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson would conceive. I mean, I get the Ben Shapiro part, but Tucker Carlson, I don't really see that. Jacqueline says, what made you change your mind from conspiracies to mainstream media? It's hard to explain, but one piece of the puzzle that actually made me do that is the movie Eyes Wide Shut. Malcolm says, are you married yet? No. Entertaining says, you're such a cutie. Okay. Saddam says, do you believe in the death penalty? If I have to say yes or no, no. SO says, what's your favorite online multiplayer game? Probably Rainbow Six Siege. Debug says, Don, I will give you $2,000 if you can do 3 backflips in a row. I'm not going to do that. AT says, I used to believe it when I was your age. When you reach mine, hopefully you learn. I mean, I already was like you, so. JK says, your beliefs are close to a Catholic. They are. Okay. Patrick says, I think a stretch in the military would be a good place for you to start. Thank you for the recommendation. I mean, yeah, maybe. Cheesy says, should I start to learn how to cook so I could make meals for my family? I mean, if that'll be useful to your family, then that sounds like a good use of your time. Mello says, do you have nothing to talk about? I could just ramble on myself, but I think it's more interesting if I bounce off the chat. Big C says, what's up, Dong Hong? Hello, Big C. Baba says, did Trump give Bill Clinton head? It's nobody knows. I mean, maybe it seems like it, but do we really know? We don't. AT says, I went from conspiracy to mainstream to back to conspiracy, but this time with facts and research. Huh, you did all of that. That's, wow, okay. Evan B says, would you rather have Wolverine's claws or the ability to store pee in your balls? Wolverine's claws. Patrick says, who would you consider your heroes? I don't know if I have heroes, but I think Stonewall Jackson is pretty cool. Hit Knight says, you look handsome today. Thank you. SM says, Father Don, sending you and not our cult members refreshing greetings from Ireland. Hello, SM. Enochian says he's an AI with nano juice multiplying in his nervous system. I don't think so. Patrick Rowe says, I would have thought you would have said something like, Boy George? What? Crestfallen says, no joke, the guy's stream above this one, he's thinking he's becoming Jesus Christ. Wow. Max says, do you envy people or admire them more? Both. I'm not sure which one more, though. JK says, Stonewall Jackson, the Civil War Confederate general. Yeah, but I read that, you know, he actually wasn't pro-slavery if you read about him. Rated says, what's your view in the pending war with Venezuela? I hope deaths don't happen. Molly says, crazy pew. Okay. AT says, can we call you Hispanic Edward Cullen? I like Eduardo Cullen. JK says, I don't envy anyone. I pity all you fools. I feel like you're not being truthful. Troy says, what kind of hair growth biological style is that? I don't know. What would you call it? Jolina says, there are already deaths in Venezuela. Okay. Mr. Lone says, would you consider yourself a Hispanic Jew? I mean, I'm not literally a Jew. I just maybe say yes, I am a Jew just to be funny sometimes. Speedstar says, I scrolled and I saw you again. Welcome back. SW says, why are you acting like a robot? Because if I have a system as to the way I do things, as to the way I talk, it consumes less energy. Mad Dog says, you look like a preteen Liam Neeson. Okay. Rated says, does this make you happy? In a way, I guess, kind of, to a degree. Mr. Lone says, when will you start your own Discord server? Maybe this month. Maybe. SW says, what are you actually doing? What do you mean? I'm live streaming, reading chat messages. Ashley says movie night. Maybe. Probably not. JK says, does take a massive dump give you a sense of accomplishment? No. James says, does parasocial play a part in your life? Yeah, I mean, I watch a lot of YouTube videos and social media stuff. I've maybe gotten attached to like YouTube creators. Baba says, do you know Robert Maxwell? Ghislaine Maxwell's father, the criminal guy? I guess so. KJ says, what's good, you dirty little queef? I don't like that nickname. Sedum says, did you go to uni? Maybe. Rated says, do you watch Asmongold? Yeah, sometimes. iDodd says, does my YouTube channel name weird? It's hard to read. Zachariah says, Zachariah, happy birthday. You're wishing yourself you're wishing yourself happy birthday to yourself? That's bizarre. Fox says, favorite McDonald's item? The Big Mac. AT says, how does Moses make coffee? He brews it. Funny. SW says, why are you giving short replies? Stop, it's annoying. Because if I give short replies, it gives me time to read more comments. I want the chat to be the focus of the stream, not me. Italo says, everyone has read 1984 because we've all been to high school. Yeah. Rated says, do you think the Hassan drama with his dog was funny? The shot collar thing? Yeah, I guess. SM says, I would like to recommend a short horror movie, The Haunting, Season 1, Episode 1. Okay, thanks for the recommendation. Italo says he needs to protect his art. What? James says best Batman villain? I don't know, the Joker. Crom says, hi, I'm Jaden. I'm from Australia. Nice to meet you. Hello, Jaden. SW says, you look like a teenager. Okay. Waylon says, laughing my ass off, you look like Sid from Ice Age. I do. My eyes are far apart. Okay. Honeybun says, hey, do you watch anime? Not really. I have watched some Studio Ghibli movies, though. JK says, is there any significance to the 430 in your YouTube name? Yes. SW says, how old are you? I keep that private. Carl says, have you ever meditated in a public restroom toilet stall? I haven't, but I haven't. Baba says, have you ever studied pig physics? Is that like a Half-Life thing? No. SW says, where do you live? The United States of America. William says, good morning. I enjoy seeing you pop up on my feed every morning. That's nice to hear. Marna says, are you hate yourself or just need attention? Well, I don't hate myself. Maybe there's truth in the need attention thing. JK says his birthday is April 30th. Maybe. SW says, tell us about your life in the United States. It involves lots of fast food, watching media. Carl says, do you enjoy the smell of napalm? No. AT says, why is there a gap on the side of your head and your hair? I'm not injured or anything. I guess genetics. SW says, are you a fan of Trump or not? I'm not interested in talking about that. Captain One says, you must love consumerism. I mean, guiltily, yeah. J-Man says, what would you do if you woke up only to realize all the YouTube streaming that you did was a little dream? Try it in real life. AT says, do you like to drive? No. Carl says, eugenics? What about it? Tim says, Kyle Rittenhouse or Trump? No comment. Joshua says, Katie, wake up. You're telling someone in the chat to wake up? Okay. AT says, you got a new computer chair? The chair that I'm sitting in is not new. Vivi says, what is your favorite singer? I don't have one. Patrick says, would you rather live in a black neighborhood or a Jewish neighborhood? I'm not going to answer that. Loki says, what is your go-to fast food chain? McDonald's. SW says, why do you eat so much junk food? Human nature. My taste buds like it, despite it, being unhealthy. Rated says Jewish, that's where you would live? Okay. Superior says, I feel like you're slightly more energetic this live stream. I am? Okay. Gascal says, nuclear missile. All right. James says, did you enjoy school? Somewhat. JK says, do you like Chick-fil-A? Yes. Sushi says, what time is it? It's nighttime. That's all I'll say. AT says, what are your PC specs? Well, one of the specs is that I have 64 gigabytes of RAM. SW says, are you depressed? No. AT says, Taylor Swift is lame. Maybe, but my ears enjoys hearing her music on the radio. Carl says, are you a Holocaust denier? No. AT says 64 gigabytes to fuck. I bought it used and I didn't choose that. It just came that way. KC says DDR5 or DDR4. I think it's R4. Jay says, bros' hairs look like they've seen something they weren't supposed to. Huh, okay. AT says, what CPU video card? I forget. I think it's Intel i7, maybe a NVIDIA 1060. I'm not sure. Nobody says a painful poop. Okay. Ashley says, are you a fan of Guillermo del Toro? No. Sushi says, do you say okay when you don't know what to say? Well, if I read a statement and I have no comment to make about it, then I say okay. Salvador says, stop asking about a juvenile woman in her 30s singing about her high school problems. Taylor Swift. That's what you think of her? Okay. Patrick says, are you a misogynist? Do I hate women? No. Cal says, I just scrolled the lives. It's all poop compared to you. There's got to be better lives than this. Benjamin says, did you know fish can get diarrhea? No. Matt says, are you generally happy? Yes. Femboy says, do you feel uncomfortable driving behind a truck hauling logs? Yes. SW says ethnicity. Well, Hispanic, Latino. Scorch says, is it pink? I don't have a vagina. Salvador says Ashley Rose. Who's that? JK says barbecue or seafood tonight? Barbecue. AT says, I will never understand people's obsession over another human being like singers. I bet you probably have had it. Patrick says, would you have a problem getting a girl in a New Orleans bordello with a pound of coke and $100 bills coming out of your pockets? I mean, I wouldn't do that, but I imagine if most people would be able to pull that off, considering that they have all of that. Blesson says, would you date Blue Ivy? Who's that? Ashley says, gotta go, but it was nice seeing you. Bye, Ashley Rose. Ashley Rose. Okay, some guy in the chat was talking about you. Okay, I get it now. AT says, never have. I love certain artists, but would never go crazy over them. I'm suspicious of you still. Jolisha says, hand emoji. Is this clapping or washing hands? It looks like washing. Brittany says, what's your ethnicity? Latino. What's up, dude? Says A67. Funny. Blesson says, would you date Stormy Webster? I don't know who that is. Sushi says, do you get much money from this? No. James says, how much time do you spend on Reddit? 0. Hugh says, why do you do this? I'm not sure. I just have an urge to. Patrick says, are you in Puerto Rico? No. SW says, you ever had a girlfriend? No comment. Brittany says, what's your BPM? BPM? I don't know what that is. Whattis says, are you okay? Yes. Marna says, do you hate modern life? No. Nobody says, oof, no comment means no. It doesn't work that way. Xanu says, is life decent where you are? Yeah, it is. SP says, hey Don, I'm back. Hello, SP. Dannyville says, hello. Hello, Dannyville. Salvador says, how much time you spend per day streaming? It varies, but on average, like 2 hours. SW says, how tall are you? 5'7". Patrick says, how many LGBTQ conventions have you been at? 0. MS says, have you been hit in the balls before? No. Captain 1 says, too bad you aren't a foot taller, so I could be 6'7". I see. Femboy says, is Chris Chan a product of the internet, or was he just doomed from the start? I would say a product. SM says, nobody has ever seen Father Don and Batman in the same room. Cute. Rated says, fending off the trolls like it's nothing. I mean, I don't even see trolls. Like, I just consider everyone a chatter. Sushi says, I had my last exam today and my seat number was 6'7". Okay. Invalid says, I'm legitimately 6'7". Cool. AT says, what do your friends think of you streaming? They don't, I mean, indifferent. 530 says, you rather fight a trans man or a woman? No comment. MS says, Don likes to feel small? No. SW says, what's up with his personality? What do you mean by that? I love says, are you gay? No. D says 1 finger or 2. No comment. Mr. Lone says, I would not want my friends to know I stream. Okay. SP says Batman or Batman Beyond. What's Batman Beyond? Are those games? I don't know them. D says, show us your vampire teeth. No. Jacqueline says, so much spamming at the moment. Yeah, I turned off slow mode. SW says, he never had a girlfriend. I never had a girlfriend. Okay. Astro says, why are you so stressed, bro? I'm not stressed. I'm in a very peaceful vibe right now. Mama says, do you have brain damage after live stream? No. I think this is less brain rot than like watching TikTok or YouTube shorts, in my opinion. Archer says, good morning, Father Don. Hello, Archer. Threat says, I wish you and I can be together forever. Okay. Flick Flaw says, in my 25 years of being, I've never been flashed. Can you do that for me? No. SW says, what is your goal with life? To live in the moment. Cool Kid says, hi. Hello, Cool Kid. Astro's World says, you seem stressed though. Maybe it's because I just have this position with my hand. I'm not stressed. This is just comfortable. Bro Exotic says, so what's the objective of the stream? As with most streams, there's no objective. It's just purposeless slop. Star Winters says, morning, wood carving or bonfire? Bonfire. SP says, Batman Beyond is Terry McGinnis, a teenager who becomes the new Batman. Huh, okay. Scott says, how much to shave your hair off? $3,000. Femboy says, thinking back on it, I've been flashed a ridiculous amount of times. Okay. Star Winter says, why bonfire? Because it's quite the spectacle. Gian says, I find you interesting but naive. I'm naive. Okay. Ishneen says, snow or not snow? Snow. James says, do you like roller coasters? I want to say no, but to be honest, I think I do. Scott says, do a kickflip. I don't know how to do that. Nobody says, he's just sheltered. He's not naive. Sheltered. Okay. Hugh says, I want to leave this live, but I can't for some reason. Just do it. As that one guy says, just do it. SW says, eat something. Not on stream. Mr. Lone says, can I sleep on your stream? You can sleep listening to it, but not with me. MS says, Dawn is definitely not naive. I mean, maybe in some ways, in other ways, no. Shane says, you kind of look baked. Okay. Patrick says, how bad were you heckled in school? I wasn't heckled. J-Man says, should the name be the original Hercules or the newly adapted Hercules name? What? SW says, do you live alone? Maybe. James says, did you go to prom? No comment. 530 says cat or fruit emoji. Fruit emoji. Hoopla says, will you be my nemesis now? No. Wakanda says, why do you look so young? I guess it's just my genetics, my face. Barry says, are you androgynous? Doesn't that mean like, um, I mean, that's for you to answer. It's James says, I get saying no comment to political and racial things, but prom, I I think talking about my school might indicate eventually like where I might have gone to school, and I don't want that to be known. Boiling says, can you see my comment? Frog emoji. I can. Patrick says, can't tell the difference between a man or a woman. Okay. SM says Hercules, not Heracles. What? SW says, have you ever been bullied? Well, not to my face. Liv says, I'm on the bus on my way to school. Okay. Michelle says a favorite color. Gray. Gian says laughing emoji. Okay. Julia says, are you a trap producer from Atlanta? No. Brittany says, where do you live? The United States of America. Draxi says, do you fart? Unfortunately. EJ says, my neighbor looks like a sexier Eva Mendes. Okay. Moon says, gotta go to work, but engaging to boost. See you later. Astro says, do you like cats? I don't. Chess says, this dude looks like he hangs out with Thomas Crooks. No. SW says, can you tell us about the bullying episode? I don't have those episodes. I think it would have been interesting if I did have them instead of just boring silence at school. Warrior says, are you gay? No. Wakanda says, is it flat or curvy? What? Astro says, can you laugh? I do sometimes. Jolina says, I don't like cats either. Okay. Traff says, can you make a joke? No. I love singing says, what does make you scared? Car crashes. SW says, are you still in school? High school? No. Marna says, V emoji? Okay. Tank says, this chat is weird. Yeah, it is. I don't ban people, so it can get weird because of that. Brittany says, what did the fox say? I don't remember. I don't remember that song. Kuda says, does it clap? No comment. James says, what do you study? I'm going to keep that private. Mr. Lone says, will you end at 4 or 5? I keep that a mystery. Republic says, nice to see you today. I'm going into treatment. I hope I'll see you later. Drax says, LGBTQ emoji. You're gay? Good for you. SW says, what do you think of the people in the chat? I mean, I think this is a good chat. I prefer, maybe this is like a pretentious view, but I prefer chats that don't really ban people. I think if you don't ban people, you just let them say what they say, the chat is like alive and interesting. But maybe this is a pretentious like view, and I'll eventually start banning people in the future. Warrior says, do you support furries? I mean, I think they're kind of weird, but I guess I support them. Dr. Benitez says, nah, it's a good view. Okay. Tom says that's actually a W take. You like it? Okay. Myrna says, when did you start YouTube? Well, I started live streaming September this year. Boiling says, EU promoting homosexuality and cross-dressing. Yeah, that's happening. Not Noob super chats 10 HK currency. I don't know what currency that is. Not Noob says hi, bro. Hello, Not Noob. Thank you for the 10 whatever currency that is. Can someone tell me what currency that is, please? SW says, do you earn money on YouTube? A little bit. Carl says, will you teach me how to vomit properly? No. Not Noob says Hong Kong dollars. Hong Kong dollars. Okay. Marsh says, the crewless Mary Celeste was found drifting in 1872. Cargo intact, no signs of struggle. Wow, is that real? That sounds like it's apocryphal, like this ghost ship. Captain One says this is Dawn's alter ego, Demon Dawn. Oh, because of the lighting. Jacqueline says yes, it's Hong Kong. Okay, it's Hong Kong. Kay says, what's your favorite movie? Eyes Wide Shut. Lavia says, no. No what? Patrick says 10 Hong Kong dollars is $1.28. Okay. Warrior says, I'm a furry. Good for you. JK says $10 Hong Kong, $1.28 USD. Yeah, I got it. Bowling Frog says, have you ever read David Icke's books? David Icke's books? No. DP says, nice. Eyes Wide Shut man. Man of taste. Okay. SP says, some guy uploaded Stranger Things finale to Cornhub. Is that possible? Did that really happen? That's funny if that happened. Patrick says, do you speak Spanish? No. Lavea says, what about behind her eyes? What? Sodom says, you look like you drink pumpkin latte. I'm not into lattes or coffee. Sint says, all of you pray for me to marry my love, please. I'm not someone who prays, so. Dr. Benitez says, if you spoke Spanish, would you be okay with that? Yeah, I definitely would be okay with that. Why would I not be okay with that? Shannon says, I will pray. Okay, that's nice that someone's praying for that person. Creative says, are you ignoring my questions because you don't like cats? No, I think cats are pretty cool. But to be honest, I prefer dogs because, you know, I'm biased. I've been around them more than cats. So JK says, would you bang Nicole Kidman? No. SW says, what is corn pub? It's slang for Pornhub. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's its own website. Hugh says, where do babies come from? The vagina. Giyu says, what's your opinion on anime? I watched Paprika. That movie was pretty cool. Ashcat says, "Hey Don, you're so handsome. Please never shave your eyebrows." I wasn't planning on that. Dubai says, "I am not fucking gay." You're not gay? Okay. SW says, "What do you want to do for work when you grow up?" Video editing. J-Man says, "Hong Kong or Hong Don. See my way out now." You're gonna leave because that joke was bad. I'll leave too.